For decades, whenever American officials visit India or vice versa, the US media has praised the relationship between two countries, which is between the oldest and the largest democracy in the world. According to American scholars, the principle of shared democracy is the enduring foundation of relations. Two sides also have similar worldviews and interests. President Franklin Roosevelt once told Prime Minister Mahatma Gandhi, quote, "Our common concern is democracy and justice, helping the peoples of two countries achieve their goals and fight a common enemy." During the Cold War, the United States tried to persuade India to oppose the Soviet Union, arguing that India was a democracy in opposition to the authoritarian model of the Soviet Union. When President George W. Bush reached a civil nuclear agreement with India in 2005, he hailed the two nations as natural partners, sharing deep values. Yet again and again, India has only partially satisfied the United States. For example, Prime Minister Mahatma Gandhi prioritized independence for India from the British Empire rather than joining forces with allies against fascist Japan and Germany. India denied political affiliation with the United States during the Cold War, increasing cooperation with the Soviet Union instead. After the end of the Cold War, India maintained warm relations with Russia. India also refuses to cooperate with the US on the Iran nuclear issue. India also maintains an easy stance with neighboring Myanmar's military junta. Most recently, despite pressure, India refuses to condemn Russia for the war in Ukraine. However, according to experts, no matter what, two sides still have a common strategic goal. According to some U.S. scholars, the foundation of democratic values of U.S.-India relations is only partially correct. For example, since Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power 9 years ago, many problems have arisen that were not there before. Muslims are more stigmatized and attacked. Millions of Muslims are at risk of being stripped of their citizenship. The press and opposition leaders are also greatly reduced freedom of expression. While the common values of two countries show signs of weakening, material interests become strong. India and the United States currently have the same geopolitical rival, China. Each side understands that the other can help them win the competition with the most powerful country in Asia. For the United States, India is a major power with a key role in Asia, located on important shipping lanes, sharing a long land border in dispute with China. For India, the United States is an attractive source of advanced technology, education, and investment. India still has close ties with Russia, but is shifting its reliance on Russian weapons to purchase systems from the West. The need is even more urgent when the Ukraine war broke out. Russia was forced to keep weapons and components to supply its army. Some experts suggest to make the best use of complementarity, the United States must change the fundamental principles in the relationship. For example, India should no longer be viewed as a stronghold of democracy, but as a strategic partner for mutual benefit. That shift won't be easy, as Washington has long viewed its partner with rose-colored glasses. American leaders, especially liberals, believe that democracy is India's identity, so New Delhi deserves support. For example, in 1958, then Senator John Kennedy introduced a bipartisan resolution to increase support for India, based on the idea that it was important for the United States to support a nascent democracy to prevent the encroachment of socialist movements. Former U.S. diplomat Dennis Cox once wrote, "The U.S. effort to help India consolidate democracy has succeeded. This help has grown dramatically from $400 million in 1957 to $822 million in 1960. President Dwight Eisenhower, speaking at the opening of the World Agricultural Fair in New Delhi in December 1959, quote, "Whatever strengthens Indian democracy, my people believe it also strengthens the U.S. Both of our countries are striving for world peace. 6 months later, President Eisenhower signed a groundbreaking multi-year agreement with India to provide $1.28 billion in food aid under the United States Peace Program. The reason is Indian farmers are often unable to meet the great food needs of the nation. However, Congressman John Kennedy and President Eisenhower failed to hope for India to become an ally. In 1954, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru declared India a non-aligned country in the Cold War. Congressman John Kennedy, then president, invited Prime Minister Nehru to visit Washington in 1961, hoping to persuade India to choose sides, but was also helpless. Diplomat Cox recalled that the successors of President John Kennedy were similarly disappointed with India. President Lyndon Johnson was upset when in 1966, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi criticized the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. Indira Gandhi emphasized that the U.S. must withdraw its troops from South Vietnam. In 1971, India signed a friendship treaty with the Soviet Union. Secretary of the State Henry Kissinger described the move as a bomb in the gunpowder barrel in India-Pakistan relation. In 1980, India's ambassador to the United Nations supported the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, which also angered Washington. However, relations between two countries have never been so tense. India has its own reasons and often shares them publicly as well. For example, they are also concerned that jihadist groups in Afghanistan can infiltrate their country and cause terrorist attacks like they have in the past. In a speech to Indian Parliament in 2000, President Bill Clinton described democratic principles that were making India a reliable partner. India has many lessons to offer the world. President George W. Bush and Barack Obama often describe the relationship between two countries as between the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy. In his address to the Indian Parliament in 2010, President Obama emphasized the special relationship between two countries. He supports India's permanent seat on the Security Council, as cooperation between India and the United States on the Security Council would strengthen the foundation of the democratic governance globally. During the Joe Biden administration, Washington continued to forge a close relationship with India based on shared values. President Joe Biden invited Prime Minister Modi to two summits on democracy. Prime Minister Modi delivered speeches at each conference. During a meeting with Prime Minister Modi in May 2022, President Biden said that cooperation between India and the United States is built on shared commitments to democracy and global governance. When Foreign Secretary Antony Blinken visited India in July 2021, he said, "The relationship between our two countries is very important and strong because it is a natural relationship between democracies. But again, India only partially satisfied the United States. India works closely with the United States in the Quad, but there are differences on some remaining policies. For example, India maintains relations with and sells weapons to the Myanmar military junta after the coup in 2021. India also has an important voice in the BRICS group, which includes Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa. The BRICS frequently criticize the United States and the Western-led international order. India buys most of its weapons from Russia. India voted empty in all UN meetings condemning Russia's attack on Ukraine." Senator Chris Murphy said, "Honestly, many of my colleagues and I are perplexed by India's ambiguity in the face of the greatest threat to its democracies since World War II. At a time when democracies are rallying to condemn Russia's war, it is unsettling to see India, the world's largest democracy, sitting on the sidelines." According to some experts, India's stance on the war in Ukraine goes against the values that New Delhi espouses. Prime Minister Modi's BJP party won two resounding victories in 2014 and 2019. Since then, the government has increasingly declined criticism in the media and press. For example, India outright banned a BBC documentary in 2023 depicting Prime Minister Modi's role in deadly riots in the state of Gujarat in 2002. Global democracy ratings organizations such as VDEM, Freedom House, and the Economist Intelligence Unit have all downgraded India's scores since Prime Minister Modi took office. Since coming to power, Prime Minister Modi's BJP has made no secret of its intention to bring a more prominent identity to India. They have affiliated with RSS, an organization that wants to align Indian identity with Hinduism, a religion that inherits the former Brahminism. This was opposed by two former Prime Ministers, Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, because they wanted to protect the rights of minorities. This is also the reason why Hindu extremists and RSS members assassinated Prime Minister Gandhi in 1948. According to experts, the harder it is in favor of nationalism, the less secure India is. India is home to 200 million Muslims, roughly equal to the population of Pakistan. India has a long and bloody history involving ethnic and religious conflicts. India's Hindu nationalism at home also propels New Delhi towards its goals of reducing freedom abroad. Hindu nationalists believe that one of their foreign policy achievements is to mobilize foreign RSS-affiliated groups in the Indian people communities to lobby governments, including the United States, to support the BJP's initiatives. Some Hindu nationalists believe that India is a vast civilized power. They wanted to create Akhand Bharat, an undivided India, stretching from Afghanistan to Myanmar, from Sri Lanka to Tibet. In 2022, the head of RSS, Mr. Mohan Bhagwat, announced this could become a reality within 10 to 15 years. His statements raised questions about the true meaning of the Hindu cultural union. They have raised some concerns in the region about whether India is really pursuing peace as claimed. Despite evidence of BJP nationalism, American officials have avoided publicly criticizing the Indian government. Instead, as Secretary of State Blinken declared in 2021, quote, "Every democracy is imperfect. The important thing is to make progress together." Many experts said that it is a pity when India is reducing its commitment to democracy. Even so, India remains an invaluable partner to the US. India is the most populous country in the world, the fifth economy in the world, the second largest armed force in the world, and equally important, they have a force of highly qualified scientists and engineers. India is also an English-speaking country, so all cooperation with the US and the West is favorable. India and the United States also share a common concern, the rise of China, with its intent to change the global order. When China began encroaching on Indian territory along the Sino-Indian border, causing a deadly clash in 2020, Washington supplied New Delhi with cold weather equipment and intelligent information to New Delhi about the location of Chinese soldiers. The US is also speeding up the delivery of drones with surveillance functions. Since then, US officials have concluded that two countries have great potential for defense cooperation, both on land and at sea. The White House hopes the threat from China and Russia's war in Ukraine will give Washington a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to convince New Delhi to shift its heavy reliance on Russian military equipment to Western systems. Alternatively, Washington could also work with New Delhi to rebuild aging telecommunications infrastructure. The US could also accelerate the relocation of more supply chains from China to India. The South Asian country will benefit greatly from this, but some analysts still advise Washington to be cautious. Although India has a tough policy towards China, for example, directly banning hundreds of Chinese applications, especially the social network TikTok, but trade between two countries still increased sharply. India is also a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization led by China. So for the United States, cooperation with India must be specifically targeted. like countering immediate threats posed by China. The US has been doing this, like conducting exercises with India near the Chinese border in November 22. Washington also wants to sign an agreement giving the United States access to India ports in exchange for technology and intelligence transfers. According to some scholars, the US-India relationship is not an alliance like in NATO. India would never want such an alliance. Therefore, agreements such as the transfer of nuclear submarine technology in August will not apply to India. It is also difficult for Washington to systematically share intelligence with India, as it is doing with the Five Eyes Alliance, which includes Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. The advice given, Washington should support India to participate more in international organizations, of which New Delhi is a member. India's voice is needed globally, especially for developing countries. Washington should also work more with India, along with Australia and Japan in the Quad, to deter China's threatening behavior. India has sent warships to patrol in South China Sea. This can be done even more in the East China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. India's help will mean a lot to the US and its alliance in Asia. There is no denying that India and the United States have common concerns about China. This is a strong motivation for two sides to cooperate. On the issue of human rights, the US can take a soft approach to India, for example, releasing the report about exactly what India is doing. This will certainly cause criticism, but it will not damage cooperation between two countries. Over time, both have shown that they can manage disagreements skillfully, not to affect the larger common goals. The Nixon administration re-established diplomatic relations with China in 1972 in order to deepen the conflict between Beijing and Moscow, causing the Soviet Union to collapse. Washington's move was initially successful, but Phase 2 has caused much controversy. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, American businesses invested heavily in China, and Chinese goods also flooded into the United States. The U.S. contribution, especially in terms of markets and technology, has helped China rise strongly. Economic growth leads to increased investment in defense. Once strong enough, China wants to overthrow the U.S. number one position and rewrite the international order. Some argue that in the competition with China, the US cannot do without India. India is not China. India has never posed a challenge to America. Controlled conflicts between two countries, such as India's cooperation with the Soviet Union and Russia, are mainly because India wants to protect its own interests. Unlike China, India has never wanted to harm US interests. Relations with India should continue to be enhanced for strategic and substantive interests. During his visit to the US in June, Prime Minister Modi will have a speech in both houses of parliament. He is a rare foreign politician who has had the honor of doing so twice. This is a quiet but unwavering affirmation of India's importance in American foreign policy. This has come to an end of our program today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.